All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Mary Beth Huberti, and I am Program Director here at Operation Parent, and we are so excited to have such a wonderful group and crowd of parents, counselors, school people, school administrators, plus community leaders who are here today to learn more about how to help your teen cope with anxiety during COVID-19. We have a wonderful presenter with us today, Dr. Tanya Stockhammer. She's a clinical psychologist here in Louisville, and she is in the practice, her practice name is StrongMinds. So just looking here, I'm getting messages as I'm going through, sorry. So I just wanted to go over one thing about our next couple webinars. We have a webinar on Monday, April 13th. This is a rebroadcast of a previous webinar. This will rebroadcast at 8 o'clock at night. It's on prescription opioid abuse by C. Martin Red. He is the he's with the DEA. He did a wonderful job on this webinar, full of information. You can ask questions. They will not obviously be answered live, but they will come to us and we can forward any questions you would have from this webinar right to Mr. Red, and he will reply back to you directly. Then our next live webinar is on marijuana, parenting for prevention in 2020. That is scheduled for April 27th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. Kristen Storm will be doing this for us. She is part of the Karen Treatment Center, Director of Community Education. Great presentation. You learn a lot about the different forms of marijuana, why it's so important to keep our youth away from marijuana. So they are our next two upcoming webinars. You can register for either one of these at operationparent.org or register for all of them. We'd love to have you. So with that, I'm going to open up and turn you over to Michelle Massey, my cohort, who's done a lot of work on this webinar with Dr. Stockhammer, and she is going to go over the technical side of the webinar. So go right ahead, Michelle.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to just talk you through the technology that you'll be using today really quickly. If you are a returning attendee webinar, welcome back. If you're new, this is for you. First, on your webinar control panel, you'll see an orange tab with an arrow. If you wish to view your screen without the control panel, just click on that orange arrow and minimize the control panel. For now, though, just click on that orange tab or arrow and view all the features with me. Mostly, we'll be utilizing the question feature today. Just so you know, you're going to be muted during the presentation, but where we get to connect, which we're eager to do today, is in the question section. You're going to see that about halfway down on the control panel. You will send both questions and comments here. There's a light blue panel where you're going to type in your questions and they're going to be sent directly to me. Send us questions all throughout the webinar. We love questions, and that's mainly why we're here today. All the questions are going to be answered at the end of the presentation today. Just keep in mind, we'll probably go over the 60-minute mark with the question and answer segment. We're planning to not go beyond 3:15, but if for some reason you need to hop off early, we understand. You'll also notice a handout section. We have put together some amazing handouts for you today. Just going to tell you a little bit about them. There's one titled Helping Teens Cope with Anxiety During COVID-19. Those are resources put together specifically by Dr. Stockhammer for you. There's a guide to helping families cope with COVID-19. This is from the National Child Traumatic Stress Institute. You also have the slide handout from today's presentation. A really great resource from Child Mind Institute, supporting teens during COVID-19, where they talk about radical acceptance of all the anxiety surrounding all the unknown factors that we're all dealing with right now. The last one is titled Hey Sigmund, Anxiety in Teens. The neat thing about that handout is they also recommend the Smiling Mind app as a meditation option for teens. So those 5 handouts are available for you. If you want to download them right now, just double click on them. The handouts in that location are only going to be available while we are live. but just know that prior to this webinar, you received an email also containing the handouts. We're recording the presentation, and this recording will be sent to you tomorrow afternoon. There will be a short survey accompanying that email. If you take about 2 minutes to complete it, I can promise you we always utilize the feedback and greatly appreciate it. Now it is my great pleasure. Well, first, let me back up and tell you about our mission here at Operation Parent. Operation Parent's mission is to love and support parents by providing real-world information, connection, and hope. And with that, it's my great pleasure to turn the webinar over to Dr. Tanya Stockhammer from StrongMinds. And we want to thank you so much for helping us put this together so quickly.
Well, and I want to say thank you, Mary Beth and Michelle, for all the support you've given to help me prepare this talk. Hi, everybody, and thank you for listening and taking the time out of your day to be here. As you've heard, I'm Tanya Stockhammer. I'm a psychologist here in Louisville, Kentucky, where I've been working for the past 16 years, the last 10 of which I've been in private practice with my co-owner, Dr. Felicia Smith at StrongMinds, a child and adolescent psychology specialty practice. Before that, I'm actually a native New York and New Jerseyer. In addition to growing up there, I went to undergrad at Rutgers, and so a shout out to everybody from New Jersey, and to graduate school at St. John's University in Queens, doing some of my extended graduate training in Manhattan. Like many of you, here I am at home trying to adjust to the new normal with my family, which includes 2 teens and a preteen, and also trying to work out the logistics of working from home, like getting used to new technologies, like the headphones that I've got on my ears right now, and this webinar format that I've not used before, and figuring out how much I need to dress up for work meetings when I'm meeting from home, figuring out how to help my kids navigate the new rules of social connection, and trying to also navigate, I have a spouse who's a healthcare worker, and how to navigate quarantining at home when there may have been a workplace exposure to COVID-19. So I say all of that to let you all know that I'm also in this with you all, as much as I'm on a personal level, as much as I'm also in it on a professional level. I want to acknowledge that many of you listening are probably experiencing periods of extreme anxiety and stress inducing situations right now. I'm hopeful that this talk provides you with some tools that are useful on a personal level and a professional level, and ideas that feel helpful. So a little bit about what I hope to cover today. As Michelle and Mary Beth said, we are going to leave lots of time for questions and answers. But to start with, we're going to just cover a few things. One is just kind of a brief overview of anxiety and how it works, the ways in which it's helpful and not helpful. Reviewing the risk factors for teens for having trouble with anxiety. And then talking about some anxiety management strategies that are good places to start in terms of providing support to teens in the current epidemic. So to start with, let's talk about what we mean by stress and anxiety. And one of the things that you all should know is that I will use these words fairly interchangeably in this talk, and generally mean normative stress and anxiety, and not necessarily anxiety disorders. Anxiety and stress are neurobiologically driven. They are normal reactions to pressure and change. They can occur on a continuum, which ranges from no anxiety at all the way to debilitating anxiety. Both of those ends of the continuum can be problematic, right? So we have this wide expression of what anxiety looks like, and most of us fall somewhere in the middle most of the time. For each of us, our level and stress and anxiety will fluctuate over time. So some periods will bring with it more stress and anxiety, and some will bring less. And finally, our personal experience of stress and anxiety depends on our genetic makeup, our biology, our age, and our prior experiences, among other things. Good stress is helpful and can make life interesting, and chronic stress can lead to negative outcomes. We can show the other points. Great. So let's talk a little bit about the function of stress and anxiety. This is Zelda. I use Zelda to talk about one of the core functions of stress and anxiety, which is to activate our central nervous system in the face of danger. It does this by releasing hormones like cortisol into our brains and bodies. And that release of hormones induces the fight, flight, or freeze response, which most people have heard about. Many of us have experienced this activation to varying degrees in recent weeks with COVID-19. When this activation works well, it helps us prioritize risk and make some decisions about what we need to pay the most attention to. Anxiety also can help and have other helpful functions like increasing our focus, helping us prepare for deadlines, making us more efficient. Let's go back to the previous slide for one more second. But it can be unhelpful if it's too much anxiety. When we have too much anxiety, what happens is what's called flooding, and our brains and bodies become flooded with those stress hormones. Or if it's chronic, meaning that we feel like we're in that anxious state over long periods of times. And when we are either flooded or chronically stressed, it can interfere with our day-to-day functioning. Okay, next slide. So I want to introduce you to the stress response curve. I know in the media we've been seeing many curves lately, and this is yet another one. But I think it's an important way to understand how stress and anxiety work in our bodies. So on the left of your screen, with the red arrows, we see where stress increases when we're exposed to a stressful situation. Eventually, it reaches a peak of intense stress. And then on its own, when our stress system is working properly, the stress will start to decrease after that period of intense stress and lead us to a relaxation response. An important thing to know about stress is that stress and the relaxation response are incompatible, so we cannot be both stressed and relaxed at the same time. And this is important information when we talk about coping later on. So let's move on to teen risk factors for problematic anxiety. And these are general risk factors, not necessarily COVID-specific risk factors. So teens are at greater risk than adults for some of the reasons that we're going to show you here on this slide. But basically, teen brains are generally not fully mature in terms of emotional development, behavioral regulation, thinking and reasoning, and problem solving, really until about age 25. So it includes our young adults too. What we know about children who are more shy or behaviorally inhibited is that they will usually have more trouble with anxiety when they hit the teen years. We also know that teens who internalize their feelings and tend to use an avoidance strategy in dealing with them tend to struggle more with anxiety. And those are not teens who are not talking to parents, but those are the teens who are really kind of not talking to anyone about their feelings. Moving on, we know that teens who perceive low social support, and the word perceive is really important here because sometimes we see teens who look like they are surrounded by their friends and are laughing with their friends. I'm thinking of the school setting here, and sometimes these teens look like they're in the mix, but they perceive that they don't have close friends. They feel lonely even when they're in a group of people. And so often anxiety is a risk, or problematic anxiety is a risk for those teens. We also know teens with lower physical activity levels are prone to anxiety, and teens who are spending too much time on their screens or on social media will also struggle. You can go to the next slide. I'm watching on the slides. I'm a little bit ahead of that slide, but you all can see some of the other risk factors. So on to stress and anxiety overload. We have all felt this before, right? Stress overload sometimes comes in small ways and sometimes it comes in big ways, and it is not just something that teens experience. Overload, when it's a short-term experience, can lead to a meltdown, or it can be a chronic experience where we feel overloaded for long periods of time with difficulty finding relief. When we are overloaded, we no longer feel able to discriminate between high fear and low fear targets, meaning it's hard to tell the difference in what's important to pay attention to in those moments or what is truly dangerous. When we're overloaded with stress, the fear or anxiety will also fill in the blanks and everything seems more dangerous. So when we're in that high stress mode, we tend to the anxiety kind of gloms on or attaches itself to multiple things, and suddenly lots and lots of things feel dangerous. I think a good example of this right now is everyone's need to make sure they have enough toilet paper. And I bring that up partly because, you know, I think we can all smile a little bit about the endless quest for toilet paper that people have been having. But I think on the other hand, it really is a symptom of how stressed out and overloaded we've all been feeling and how we've been trying to let our anxiety attach itself to things that we actually can control in the face of a lot of things we can't control. Most of us feel physical stress overload in our bodies from time to time. So I think the list of physical symptoms will look very familiar to people. And even for some of us, sometimes it'll show itself in our bodies in one way, and sometimes it'll show itself in our bodies in another way. Most of us also, probably jumping down to the emotional signs, will recognize a lot of those emotional signs. And I think the same is true for teens. They probably notice the physical signs first, maybe the emotional signs second. What we tend to clue in a little less quickly to is sometimes the cognitive signs of stress overload, and then also the behavioral signs of stress overload. Some of them are sometimes obvious, like some bad habits. You know, people talk about stress eating, but you know, other signs are sometimes a little more subtle, like increasing risk-taking behaviors, like driving too fast on the highway would be a risk-taking behavior example, or self-harm behaviors. I'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide, but in teens, we think about things like cutting or other kinds of self-harm or aggression. Okay, next slide. So moving on to unhelpful anxiety management strategies. Here are some of the behavioral manifestations of stress that sometimes are used by teens as an attempt to cope. As teens are learning and developing effective coping strategies, they often are testing a wide variety of strategies, some of which are helpful, but some of which are also unhelpful. So as you can see here, we have a variety of things on the list. Information overload is really seeking out too much information or kind of obsessing over the information that you're receiving in a way that does not serve to reduce stress or anxiety. Again, self-harm behaviors, I mean things like cutting or juuling or vaping. It also sometimes can be bad habits like picking kind of on your skin or nail biting. Social media use, we will circle back to that with the helpful strategies also. But what I want to say here is that excessive social media use can still be a problem, as can unhelpful social media use. And by unhelpful, it means using social media to compare yourself to peers maybe, where what you're doing doesn't seem as fun or interesting or exciting or as good as what they're doing. But also getting access to incorrect or unhelpful information via social media. One of the other things I want to say about unhelpful anxiety management strategies, as we're starting to move forward to talk about more helpful strategies, is that the idea is not necessarily to combat the unhelpful strategies, but to make sure that we're adding in plenty of helpful anxiety management strategies. You know, if we were all robots, it would be easy to kind of flip a switch and shut off any unhelpful anxiety management strategies we each have. We all have some, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. So here's our curve again, and I just want to say a few things about how unhelpful anxiety management strategies work. As you can see in the center at the peak moment of intense stress in our curve, there is an escape shown by the blue arrow. And so the problem with unhelpful anxiety management strategies is that they usually provide a quick escape or a quick relief from the stress or anxiety causing situation. But rather than helping us ride out the anxiety to a state of relaxation and kind of moving forward, it kind of pops us back to the beginning of the stressful event or the stressful trigger. And so we wind up in this unhelpful loop of increasing stress, a quick escape, which provides a lot of relief, but then we're just right back at the beginning instead of learning how to manage and cope through the stress onto a more relaxed state. So I want to start shifting over, I'm mindful of our time, to some tips for helping and supporting teens. When I look at this picture on this slide, I think of the raging river, and what we want to do is be the banks of the river for our teens. So we can't be out in the river with our teens. Our job as parents is to be the banks and provide guidance and support from the sides. We want to so we modern parents are driven to reduce stress in our teens, right? That's what we feel like we want to do. But when we do that, we take away the opportunities for them to lean in and learn developmentally important coping strategies. So really what we want to do on the banks of the river is allow our teens to confront stressful situations themselves and develop and execute their own plan for managing with our guidance and support. So this is my sort of public service reminder to not be a helicopter parent or a lawnmower parent, but really be the banks of the river that our teen is going down. In the time of COVID, these things are definitely also still true and important to remember. Overall, our teens' most important task is their own quest towards independence. Obviously, in COVID, with all of us having significant restrictions on our independence and movement, it does provide a particular challenge when we're parenting our teens and for our teens themselves. A quick word about something called growth mindset, which is a concept introduced by Carol Dweck at Stanford University. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this slide, but what I really want to remind people is that the way we understand the brain now is that it functions more like a muscle where we can train it and teach it to learn new skills rather than each of us just being made in a certain way. So the made in a way mindset is called a fixed mindset, and the ability to learn and grow mindset is called the growth mindset. And so as we're thinking about developing more adaptive skills, we always want to remember a growth mindset. So on the next slide, here's our curve again. And here we show very quickly how the use of adaptive coping strategies can help reduce overall magnitude of stress and provide support for riding out the stress. So what happens is that as we use healthy coping strategies, repeated experiences of successfully riding out the stress leads to improved overall coping and stress management. And those lower experiences of stress help us know that we can handle this. So essentially, healthy coping strategies, and I know we've heard this phrase a lot, actually also help us flatten this curve. And so that is the goal of the healthy or adaptive coping strategies. A caveat to this, when the stress peak is really high, like it is for many right now during the COVID-19 epidemic, it is much harder for a single healthy coping strategy to help us ride out the stress. Rather, it will take a whole set of strategies used together to work through the stress and help us ride out the anxiety. Very quickly, on this slide, we're just going to show you some general teen strategies for anxiety management. I think we can kind of show those all. Teens should take care of their body, manage their emotions in healthy ways, change their thinking, be kind to themselves. Teens tend to judge themselves more harshly than those around them, except maybe their parents. They need to work on building their skills, and they need to talk it out. Some general parent strategies for anxiety management. And I want to just touch on a couple of these in a little more detail, and then we'll go to supporting your teen. One is the first one. It is essential that parents manage their own stress and anxiety, and it's for two reasons. One is stress and anxiety are contagious. And so when we are stressed and anxious, our kids know it, they feel it, they react to it. Two is that we are the best models of coping for our teens, especially in these days when many of us are all home together all the time. We need to also be aware that triggers for parent and anxiety and teen anxiety right now may be different. So for instance, a parent may fear contagion of the virus, may be having worries about making sure that family, like physical family needs, are taken care of, may be stressed out about financial concerns. In contrast, your teen may be stressed and worried about not being able to see their friends, about what this coming summer is going to look like, about not being able to play their sports season, or about being bored. All of those triggers are valid and important. They're just different. Also, parents and teens may show their anxiety in different ways. So for instance, you may have a parent whose way to manage all this stress and anxiety is just to go into hyper-functioning mode where they are really organized and getting things done, and your teen may be wanting to lay in bed all day and sleep late and not get dressed. And so we have to keep in mind that, that our reactions to the stress and anxiety really may look different from our teens. Also, I've definitely encountered some teens in my practice in the past few weeks who actually feel a little bit less anxious right now in a day-to-day way than they usually do when they are fully engaged in their day-to-day school life and academic challenges and busy after school schedules. And so it may be true that for some teens, there's actually some relief in stress right now. So how to support your teen during COVID-19? I want to touch on a few things, and I know we'll discuss some of these also in the question answer portion of the hour. So first of all, it's incredibly important to acknowledge all the feelings that your teen might be feeling. They may be feeling worry and fear about ill family members or friends, or when things will go back to normal. I want to talk about disappointment a bit, because in addition to disappointment, your teens may be feeling genuine feelings of loss or feelings of isolation. Sometimes it's going to be because of the loss of a loved one, and sometimes it may be because of the loss of seemingly smaller things, but still big deals, like the loss of a senior year of high school and its traditions, or the loss of a sports season that they had been training hard for, or of a theater season where the show couldn't go on. We also want to acknowledge the uncertainty and lack of control that they are feeling, and really that we are all feeling right now, and the lack of freedoms and behavior restrictions that have come with this epidemic. We want to help our teens to find ways to focus on the positive, finding the small silver linings and noticing them, like increased family time, or an opportunity to learn a new skill, or doing something a little different, but maybe a little better than maybe they're used to, are all ways to help them focus on the positive. Helping them to identify the controllables, by which I mean things they can control, is also really, really beneficial to teens. And so, right, teens feel like they don't have a lot they can control right now, especially older teens who are used to being able to dictate their schedule a little bit and go where they want to go when they want to go a little bit. But helping them find things that they can do to find some control in their life is important, whether it's, you know, putting on a Netflix movie in the chat function where they can watch a movie with friends, or learning how to be a better cook at home, or accessing other online platforms that help them accomplish some of the things that interest them. We want to make sure that we are helping teens set schedules The being sleeping late and being in bed all day works for a few days, but it's not sustainable, and it's also not good for their mental health. And so setting a daily schedule and even a weekly schedule is important. Setting some new goals for things they might be able to do while they're home during this period will be helpful. And so some ideas are learning how to use relaxation tools or apps, and developing a mindfulness practice, increasing or changing an exercise routine, maybe using an app to learn a new language, or completing some at-home tasks, not just cleaning their room, but maybe helping paint a room, or do some gardening, or just some other things that may be of interest to them. We want to encourage safe social activities and good sleep and movement and helping others. I'll get back to some creative ideas that I've heard of some teens having in a little bit. We want to help our teens find some small freedoms. And so this is really a work in process. Obviously, a lot of big freedoms are gone, so we have to help them find some small ones. And some of that may be that in addition to less restriction on screen access than they may have normally had, there may also be a little less monitoring of some of their on-screen activities than there was in the past. There are going to have to be ways that our teens can still have a world that feels separate from us and that they feel like they have some control in the context of not having a lot of control. We also want to be planful and for our families and with our teens about the degree to which we're exposed to news and updates. It is hard to be around this stuff all the time. Some of us have to more than others because of the work that we do, but it's okay to set a daily hour where we get our updates, or a daily time that we review apps that give us our updates. And then it's okay to walk away from it, and figuratively and literally, and just get our mind doing other things. Remember, to try and flatten that stress anxiety curve, we need to use lots of helpful coping tools, and overloading on the news is not generally one of them. We want to be honest and age appropriate with our teens about our communications with them. If we don't know the answer, a big question that I've heard a lot of is, when is life going to be normal, or when will this end? And the truth is, we don't know, and it's okay that we don't know. And part of the way that we can be in this together with our teens is to let them know that that is as stressful and difficult for us as it may feel to them. We want to make sure to collaborate and not lecture our teens. Our teens may not be showing the same level of concern or worry about some of the things that we want them to be worried about, but we need to stay in the debate with them, especially the ones who are pushing hard for some freedoms and independence. They are listening, even if it's kind of in the context of an argument, even when it doesn't seem like it. But part of getting them to listen to our perspective is to make sure that we're listening to and supporting their perspective. And it's okay ultimately if we have different viewpoints on a topic, even if the rule can't change. So some of those arguments have been around, or stressful situations, certainly in my house, have been around the amount of freedom our teens can have. Can I go see a friend? Can I go outside? What are the rules, right? And so part of working through that is to really hear what they're asking for, which is some freedom and some independence and some ability to do the social things they like to do, while we also have to say no to some of the things that they want to do, quite frankly. The last thing I want to say that's really important on this slide is that some teens really may be experiencing a worsening or new symptoms of anxiety and stress that are in kind of the debilitating end of the continuum. And so what I want to urge all of you who are listening is to not wait to seek help for those teens. Some of it may get better as some of the rules change again, but since for the foreseeable future, those rules seem like they will not change quickly, it is important to connect teens to resources even during this time. The good news is that generally providers are able to provide services via telehealth. And so there is still access to services even from home right now. Okay, next slide. So just a few other quick things, and I think some of these are similar to some of the handouts that Michelle was referring to earlier. I just compiled some trusted online resources for gathering of information. ChildMind Institute, which is the first one listed, is a go-to resource for lots of child developmental and mental health things that I use frequently. Many of the others are probably familiar. So I encourage you all to check those out. And then I think we've got a slide for some free apps. And the cool thing about many of these apps is that some of them are paid for at other times, but a number of these apps have opened up their platforms and created access that is free during this difficult time. I'm a big fan of several of the meditation apps and also several of the exercise apps. So certainly check those out.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Stockhammer, for the great information.
And
you can
with
reach
that,
StrongMinds at strongmindspsychology.com. And go ahead. Okay. All right, what we're going to do right now is open it up for questions. So go to the question feature and pose your question. We do have a few slides to finish going over, and I'm going to do that now while people are putting their questions in. One thing we like to offer to everyone who is attending this event live, but also the recorded event that will go out tomorrow. I know that a lot of people weren't able to get into this live event. We had quite the response to this event, and because of that, our platform only provides us 1,000 slots to attend the live. So a lot of people will be watching this recording. So for everybody watching the recording, this discount is also available to you. We are offering 20% off the purchase of one parent handbook, and the discount code is the date 040220. This offer you have to purchase by April 9th. We just have you go on to our website at operationparent.org, and you can order it there, and it will be applied to the discount, will be applied to the purchase of one parent handbook, and then we will just ship it to you. Shipping and handling is extra. Just a reminder, these are our next webinars coming up, and we would love to have you there for those webinars. You can find Operation Parent also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and please check out all of our webinars that are coming up, plus our recorded webinars that are free and available to anyone on our website. So you can go onto our website and go to free resources, and you will find all of our recorded past webinars. So with that, Michelle, I have your microphone open. If you want to go ahead and start with questions, that would be great.
Okay, Dr. Stockhammer, how do you forecast this COVID-19 is going to impact our youth psyche?
That's also a really great question. You know, it's a little bit hard to forecast exactly. What I would say is that previous large-scale challenges that we have seen youth exposed to before tell us that many of our youth are incredibly resilient, and that the kinds of skills that they need to learn in times of stress and difficulty wind up serving them very, very well. Having said that, so many will be okay and just fine, and maybe even very quickly put this in the rear view once we're mostly through it. Having said that, there will definitely be a subset of youth who will struggle more, for whom parts of what is going on right now will remain problematic and anxiety-inducing, and who may even start to show some signs or symptoms of exposure to a traumatic event. That will vary by child. That may well vary by the part of the country that you're in. And it will vary depending on what kind of personal and family history you may already have.
Thank you so much for that. We would like to know what specific relaxation app do you like?
So I'm a big fan of, that's a great question, of the Calm app. I think so. It's a great platform, and has lots of different kinds of relaxation and mindfulness content on it. Anything from a breathing exercise that teaches deep breathing to a body scan exercise to one that I often recommend, which is sleep stories, which are these mindfully based auditory stories that help you find some relaxation as you're trying to get ready for sleep. One of the other things I really like about the Calm app is that it's got some content specifically geared towards children and to children of different ages. So that would be definitely one that I would check out.
Okay, that's awesome. I've noticed folks like the 10% Happier app and
Mm-hmm.
several others have some COVID-19 directly related meditations that are just excellent. Like one of them was just blessing all the caretakers that are on the front line. And each one of them is kind of specific to what we're dealing with as a nation each day. All right, so Lily from New York would like to know, can we put the link for the webinar on our school website for parents?
Yes. Yes, you may. So we just encourage you to, it will send them to a registration page and they'll have to fill that out. It's very quick. And then it'll put them right into the recording. And that link will go out tomorrow in the follow-up email. But yes, you may do that.
Okay, super. Thanks, Mary Beth. Okay, so here's another great question. As teens are gathering together, despite the stay-at-home directions that we're all receiving, um, could this be related to their stress overload? Do you think that this is also a type of risky behavior? And I guess most importantly, as parents, how should we reel that back in?
Great question. Yes, I think it could be all of those things, right? I think in times of stress, what we want to do and what teens want to do is revert back to the behaviors that are familiar and comforting, and hanging out with friends in person or in real life is obviously a really important component of that. I think that from a parent perspective, that definitely does look and feel like a high risk behavior because of our cognitive awareness of the risks of transmission of this virus. I think for teens, this is one of those times where their sort of cognitive ability and their sort of cognitive immaturity is probably at play a little bit. And I think they are not in the same way that adults are grasping the risk and grasping the danger. It probably feels a little remote. I think we can teach our teens and work to teach our teens and try and help them understand those risks a little bit better, and then find safe ways. I don't like the word gathering right now, but safe ways where maybe they can see a friend in real life with appropriate safety precautions. Maybe take a walk around a neighborhood at a socially safe distance so that we're not cutting off their contact completely, but still allowing them to fill some of their need for that social contact. I think a lot about folks who may be living in apartment buildings as opposed to houses. And so I think some of this kind of coming and going from home is even more challenging in those spaces. So I'm mindful as I answer that not everybody may be able to come up with some safe alternatives.
Good point. So what do you think about how to work with a teen or, a family member who does become sick and the question is specifically geared towards mental and physical health. So I think how to stay mentally fit when you're dealing with physical issues might be the essence of that question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And so I hope this answer feels helpful. Obviously, from the sound of it, and some of this is certainly outside of my expertise, but there is a wide range of kind of getting sick that may happen with this virus, from very minimal symptoms to life-threatening and life-ending symptoms. I think for folks who are sick but kind of well enough to be home, I think we want to do sort of physical and mental comfort care as much as possible, but then also encourage those folks to keep to a routine to the extent that that feels possible and comfortable, which again may include getting out of doors to the extent that that's possible, still moving, taking a walk, or just getting out of bed and stretching legs and, moving to a different room in the house. Obviously, if there's someone sick at home, there is some home quarantine that is also challenging in terms of movement. But we know that movement is really important for mental and physical health. And so in the group where that feels possible, I think that's helpful.
Yes, and when we were doing the research on apps that we like, I mean, I was seeing any type of exercise that you might like to do. You could
Yes.
probably find free access to that right now. And so I would encourage you to be really creative in matching up exercise that you really do enjoy, and you could probably find it right now.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Absolutely. And just to add to that really quickly, I use the word movement a lot. There are groups of us for whom the idea of exercise feels very comfortable and very much kind of in our wheelhouse. But some teens don't like to exercise, right? And so I
yeah,
think it's about kind of moving your body and just finding a way to do something a little bit differently. Again, for those who maybe have a pet at home, maybe it's taking the pet outside for a little bit and interacting with that pet, or taking that pet for a walk, or right, it doesn't necessarily always have to look like formal exercise.
that's exactly right. Just any kind of movement will do for sure. Okay, so how about our teens that are becoming very comfortable not interacting with peers and teachers and extended family? So how do we encourage socialization in these teens who are just not inclined to do so naturally?
Right. So I've had a group of teens that I work with and hear about through my friends who are a little more introverted, and so homebodies rather than extroverted. And there's a part of them that's getting kind of comfortable with this being at home and only interacting with family a little bit, not so much with friends. So I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that everybody has a different level of need for social interaction. And so some teens are going to need a whole lot more, and some teens are going to be comfortable with a whole lot less. Having said that, we also know that having no peer social interaction is unhealthy. And so I think if you have a teen who is using this as kind of an opportunity to hibernate in their bedroom cave, that it is important to kind of discuss those concerns with your teen and try and come up with some options that may feel comfortable to them. And it could be that a few times a week they get onto like one of these Netflix chat movies. I think that's what it's called. It could be that a little bit every day you kind of marshal their sense of responsibility to family, and I need you to do me a favor. I need you to video chat or call your grandmother every day because she's home alone and fairly isolated, and it helps her feel good to hear from you. And so we marshal their social interaction in a little bit of a different kind of a way.
Okay, very good. The next one for me is probably one of the main reasons why we put together this webinar. So this question is that my son is 12 and has already been struggling with anxiety disorder and depression. He's one of those that you mentioned that doesn't feel like he has anyone to connect with right now. He says he has no friends to FaceTime or anything. How can I help him get connected creatively? So I think the Netflix chat movie is one idea. Do you have some other thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think we're all going to have to get creative here, right? And think outside of the box, and maybe also sometimes as parents push ourselves to, you know, maybe do some things for our young teens and older teens that maybe we wouldn't have done at other times. When the kids are at school with each other and see each other kind of face to face every day, there's a certain amount of natural social interaction that's happening. But since they don't have that anymore, it really may be a time where you as a parent need to think or marshal some friends who you know have similar age children, who maybe have kids who are having similar kinds of struggles, and sort of bring them together. And maybe part of bringing them together is kind of through a group chat where the parents are on it, or you know, maybe there's also, I've been astounded at the creativity that's out there on the internet. So maybe there's a way of getting on a live video chat where they are, you know, learning how to do a new skill via video chat, which puts them, even if it's virtual, and maybe it's not directly interactive, but it kind of puts them on a screen or in a quote unquote room with other people besides just their family.
Thank you so much for that. So sometimes we hear other adults saying that older generations had it so much harder than the current generation, which invalidates the feelings of teens, especially our seniors who are feeling basically grief and
Yeah.
loss and disappointment with the sudden end of all their activities. What can we do to really dig in there and validate those feelings? I mean, a lot of our seniors aren't wanting to talk about that too much with their parents. But we need to validate what they're feeling, and what are some ways we could do that?
Yeah, you know, I think it's a mix. I think you're absolutely right that a lot of our kids are, you know, and seniors in high school are an easy example, but I think there are versions of this for teens of all sorts of different ages, are really grieving the loss of how things were supposed to be, and you know, missed graduation, missed prom, missed things like that. I think we have to appreciate and acknowledge that for them, this is a real loss in their young lives. This is a huge set of milestones. It's true of our college students who are losing the second semester of their senior year too. These are
Absolutely.
huge. These are huge milestones that were supposed to look a certain way and now are completely different. And I think in that way, the rug has kind of been pulled out from under them. And I can fully appreciate that that is very different than a parent losing a job, or experiencing a huge shift in income, or parents who are on the front lines in all sorts of different ways that are exposed to this virus on a different on a daily basis, or to older generations who have been through other very challenging times in their life, sometimes here, sometimes in other parts of the world where life is also extremely hard. So I think we can sort of help teach our teens some perspective, but I think we can't insist that they understand our perspective. I think we really do need to meet them where they're at and acknowledge their loss. And again, kind of let them, we may find some nice ways to surprise them, to mark, these events that they're not able to mark in their usual way. But we also, I think, a little bit have to follow their lead on what they want to do to kind of mark those events.
Absolutely. This next question is definitely connected to, so for our children who are continually asking about when activities will resume or what's the date at this point, how are you navigating that in your own house? Are you sharing with them the dates that we're hearing, peak dates from governors and things like that?
Yeah, so for me, personally, and right, I think one thing to say before I answer that is that we have to appreciate that we as parents are also, kind of widely different, and that there are lots of ways to approach this that are okay and appropriate, and part of that is knowing your child and your family. In my house, my children are fairly aware of those dates. They are also pretty aware of the uncertainty. So here in our state, there was we're closing schools for 2 weeks order that has now been extended once. But we've had some honest discussions in our house speculating whether or not our children will be back in the school building before the end of this academic year. And so, I don't think my people are necessarily worried about that, but I think they're also prepared for the possibility that the end date that they've most recently heard may not be the final word on that topic.
That's very good to keep it open-ended, but also honest, because in reality, like I know here in my house too, sometimes the girls are hearing it from their friends, immediately as
Oh,
announcements are going out too via text. So it's better to just try and stay in front of it the best that you can.
right, absolutely. And I guess that's an important part about information seeking and information gathering, which is even if you as a parent are doing a great job keeping the news off and not letting it kind of feed into the house all day. The truth is our kids are hearing this. They're connected with their friends. Everything is all over the internet anyway. And so just staying open about the dialogue and acknowledging that the kids have access to some of this information, correcting misinformation when they have misinformation, but also being honest about what information we do have and what we don't know, both of which I think are very real right now.
Absolutely. We discussed we've got a lot of school counselors on with us today.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, would you know any online resources off the top of your head that they could utilize to help anxious students, especially with the online platforms, Google Classroom, and just learning without their teacher present?
Right. I wish I had a quick answer off the top of my head. I do think that, I bring people back to the Child Mind Institute because I do think they are putting really useful stuff out there. And I think some of the quality of the material that they're putting out is appropriate for school counselors as well. So they come to mind very quickly. Actually, just before I was preparing this talk, I searched up TED Talk and anxiety, and I think there are some really good TED Talks that have been done that may provide good resources too. And then finally, I do like the, sorry, it's in the, I switched pages and I don't have it here in front of me now. The, can't find it, but the resource, the mindfulness-based stress reduction work. And if you look up mindfulness-based stress reduction and kids and teens, there are several good organizations, some of them based out on the West Coast, some based in Massachusetts, that I would highly recommend as well. I'm sorry, the names of those are not coming to me so quickly right now.
Okay, got it. We can do some Google searching and also push some of that information out after we close here today.
Absolutely.
So here's a really great question for you directly related to your practice. What have you found to be some creative ways that you're supporting teens in the telehealth method who are experiencing overwhelming anxiety?
What has been interesting about this shift to telehealth, and so telehealth, just for a very brief background, has been around for close to a decade and been used a lot in underserved areas. What has been helpful in my work with teens is, and mostly I've seen teens that I had a relationship with prior to the shift to telehealth, is just the shared experience of working in this new medium, and them appreciating my, I think, humanness and discomfort with some of the parts of the new medium.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in some ways, our kids are used to talking with friends and people on screen kind of all the time. And for those of us who don't do as much of that at work, it's been a real shift. And so most of the teens I've been talking to these first weeks, you know, a lot of our talking has kind of centered around just general goals for themselves about how to structure their days and you know, enhance their coping. But then some of it has just been kind of joining around this new platform and how it makes things kind of different, but kind of the same. You know, I think it'll look different as time goes on, but that's been what I've seen so far.
It's awesome how quickly you were able to shift and still continue service. It's amazing.
It's been a process, as my colleagues that I work with most immediately will tell you.
Yes, a learning curve, right? Another curve.
Another curve, and a steep one at that.
Mary Beth, there are a lot of questions. I know I didn't capture all of them. Do you see a final question that you'd like to ask?
There was one that I thought was interesting and would talk to dealing with parents that are not together, but an ex-spouse traveling for pleasure and having to explain to the ex-spouse that it's not in the best interest of the child. So any way to help explain that, or also deal with having to tell your child you shouldn't see their parent for 14 days in the interest of self-quarantining?
Yeah, you know, I think the thing I would say, I do think all of this is more complex for families where children have two homes or multiple homes because of negotiating some of the differences, in just parenting style and lifestyle choices. But also some of the physical parts of moving between two homes, which may be different than they were before. I guess, you know, there are no easy answers to this. What I would acknowledge and sort of highlight is that some of the kinds of issues that were difficult before COVID-19 in multiple kind of family in multiple home families are going to remain difficult, and maybe the stress of the current situation may even make some of those worse. So my biggest recommendation, I think, is to be patient and have grace and be honest, and try and communicate as clearly as possible. And if that's not possible directly with an ex-spouse, then seek a helpful third party who can help facilitate that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I think we're at our time mark. I know there might be a few questions we did not get answered. Would it be okay if we send those to you?
Sure.
And if you wouldn't mind. Also, I know you mentioned earlier that in the case that people do have other questions, to reach out to other counselors for advice.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And so one of the things that we need to say is, so in this world of telehealth, most of us can only practice in the states in which we're licensed. And so it's, even though we are, a lot of us are doing this digitally, we generally can only connect people in states that we're already licensed in. So in some ways, you're still seeking to connect with local people. One way in most states to have some help in getting access to a therapist is to contact your state psychological association. Another way is to contact, if you have a third party health insurance company, is to contact that health insurance company or go into your patient portal, and usually that will generate a list of providers. Sometimes it's a little more difficult, but I know that, you know, especially now with some people practicing telehealth, some people not, some people doing a mix, it's just going to take a little patience and persistence, I think.
Yes. Another place to go find counselors and therapists is through psychologytoday.com. You can put in your zip code and then filter it down to what you're looking for, and you can get a listing of people who are within 25, 50 miles, depending on what you're choosing, and then you can read their profiles. So that's another way to go to find somebody.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close the webinar down. Thank you so much, Dr. Stockhammer, for the time and patience with this, with just putting this together so quickly. And Michelle, you did a great job, and we are just thrilled that we were able to put this together. Thank you again. Michelle, do you have anything?
Just closing, I was going to say, along with the questions, there are many, many thank yous for the information for you, Dr. Stockhammer. Lots of kudos are coming through. So thank you a million. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you to you all. And, you know, I just have to say, this is a difficult time for all of us, and we're in this together. And we just need to kind of take it one step at a time. So I'm with you all, and thank you for being here with me today.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to go ahead and close it. The recording will come out tomorrow afternoon around 4. You should have it, 4 p.m. Eastern time. So go ahead and look for that email tomorrow. And with that, I'm going to shut everything down, and thank you so much.